Hello, everybody, and welcome to the June 15th, 2023 edition of the KubeStellar Community Meeting. Today, we're going to use the agenda to go over some issues, PRs that have appeared in our backlog. So just really briefly, contributor code of conduct. So please be nice to each other. If you need the details of what the contributor code of conduct is, you can find it here. I have also just if you don't already belong to our mailing list, please do join it, and then you can edit the agenda accordingly using the link that I just dropped in the chat. As members of the community, you're welcome to insert issues onto our agenda and meeting notes, and we'll kindly move them through them in an orderly fashion, first come, first serve. So to get started with today, we're going to be using. Would anybody like to introduce themselves? I see a couple new faces. Okay, that's fine. All right, let's move on. So today's meeting, we'll use it to go through our issue list and PRs. They're located in the agenda. I'll link to them as well as in our GitHub repository under projects. So to get here, you would simply go to the EdgeMC repository. So it's kcp-dev/edgemc. Click on the projects button, click on KubeStellar, and then you will see some Kanban boards. We're focused on sprint number 1 today. Okay, so let's see. We have some new issues in the queue. So one of which is a community meeting. So I'm just going to move this over into do. And all right. So need some working rel prereqs. So I think this has to do with the instructions that are located on our site. So in each one of the individual individual examples, we have instruction sets for those that need the required packages installed. Mac appears here. We also have Ubuntu, which I believe is working. Rel is there has been I don't know if there's been any work done on that yet, but there's some exemplar instructions here might need to be modified and just checked out in general. We also have WSL. So this specific set of instructions is referenced here. The rel requirements. I have Franco, you're assigned to this one. Is everything clear on this? Can I move it out of new and into to do?
I haven't checked the rel one, but the Ubuntu seems to be working. I tested out.
Okay. So when I move it from new to do, that just means you're now aware of the issue. Is that okay if I move it over?
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay, let's see. We have WSL instructions here. Did Rob? No, I don't see Rob Phillip yet. Okay. All right. We have another one. Unreachable repo in Argo CD documentation. I opened this one this morning. If you look under community, under partners, under Argo CD, I don't believe that this repo is reachable by our community members. So June, you're assigned to this. Is it okay if I move this into to do?
Yes, but I have some other thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah, this GitHub source repo, as the name suggested, is public repo to everyone.
Oh, so they can see it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So then maybe there's no issue here.
Yeah, I just tested it with the link you posted in the description, so it works.
Okay, I assumed it was unreachable, so I will close.
Oh, okay, cool. Actually, in our previous demos, we're always using this one, and it is proved to be reachable, I guess.
Okay. I assumed it wasn't, so I apologize. My fault.
No problem.
Okay.
Yep.
Look at that. We fixed the bug.
Cool.
That wasn't a bug. All right. Next up.
Nice.
All right. Okay, fine. All right, update all documents. This P cluster is something like workload clusters. Okay, so move references to old container. Okay, so we have one in here for logical clusters. I think I spoke to Ezra a little earlier. Ezra, I'm just going to move this over into critical path, okay?
No problem.
Okay, very good. All right. Remove references to old containers. So Yana, I noticed that in the instructions for the KubeStellar syncer, there's references to the GHCRIO Yana 1205. Can we update this to go to Quay?
Yes, but I don't have access to QA.io,
Okay.
so I cannot show the example output. But if it's okay with just replacing the GHCR with QA, then yeah, I'm fine.
No, I'm gonna take care of that.
Wait
Right
a
after
minute.
this call.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that sounds alarming. What access is it that you need that you lack?
I don't have access to QA, and
Not even read access to that image?
You should be able to pull the container, yeah.
yeah, but this is build and push, the guideline to build and push a Docker image.
Oh, this is building. So this is an example. Okay.
So you
So
lack the
using this
ability
as
to
an
push.
example. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is the objective is to for user to push
Yeah.
build and push Docker image to a certain repository. I'm not intended to QA.
Okay, so Andy, if I understand right, the point here is that he wants something that anybody can do, not
Yep.
something who's
You
privileged.
see my writing?
Yeah.
A quick question. Can we just do this in the CI part of the?
No, Paolo, this is for an individual to contribute.
So the
So Donna's giving instructions on how somebody can build the Edge syncer themselves, the KubeStellar syncer themselves.
okay.
So Yana, please put in some kind of variable replacement that doesn't reference your repo, doesn't reference you directly.
Okay.
I don't know how or to do this, but otherwise you're gonna have people trying to put things in your in your
But the
GHCR.
GHCR IO is very handy repository. So
Yeah, but is there any instructions that go in here and say use
Oh.
your own?
okay. I will put the
Yeah.
more information about the repository. Okay.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
And I have a question about the CI. So is the building and pushing image of Sync already covered in CI?
Building, no, it is not yet. We have to, that can be done though. I can open an issue for that if you want, or you can open an issue.
Okay.
Yeah, so please open an issue for that, and and assign me if you'd like, where I can assign myself.
Okay.
Okay.
So then currently it's someone manually build and push
Yes.
image to create. Okay.
Yep, we can do better than that. Okay. Let's see what else we got. All right, so these are just recognizing that these bugs exist or features exist and moving them into the to-do category. So we have up next working instructions. Does anybody know if Bob's joining the call today? Bradley, can you reach out and see?
Sure.
Thank you. All right. Let's take on this next one here. So changing we can have a debate if you like on P cluster versus workload cluster, or I'll open the floor if we would like to work through this.
Oh, yes, we do need to have an agreement on new terminology. Um, the P cluster is just a small wart on the bigger issue, which is that we're trying to generalize from edge to more general multi-cluster management. P cluster was never right. It should have been edge cluster. But if we just fix that, we're not done. We're just ready to get into the real issue. So, what do we want to say instead of workspace if we're trying to be independent of KCP? One candidate would be logical cluster. That has the advantage of its advantage and a disadvantage of aligning with a concept in KCP. It's got some currency. On the other hand, again, it still sounds maybe KCP specific. The other thing I don't like about logical cluster is the word cluster, really brings to mind connotations of having worker machines that are there, doing stuff. We're really only talking about the API server and the associated controllers and storage. So I think a more kind of on point term would be something like logical API server. So in my mind, those are the two top candidates, and I'll stop there and see what other people have to say.
Ezra, you have any ideas on this one? Or anybody else in the community?
I have one very quick comment. Whatever you decide, you have to have at the very beginning in the website very good glossary and explanation, because very quickly stuff like that become essentially unreadable for people that do not understand the history or context why some things were chosen.
Totally agree.
I would try to keep Kubernetes vocabulary, not because it is good, but because people already know it, and then maybe modify it with some like edge cluster or whatever, just simply because if you have somebody that will either look on website or look on demo or whatever, are they going to be able to understand what is happening?
Ezra? And then Paolo?
I completely agree that we probably need to define it and then change all the diagrams and so on to make sure that it's clear. In addition to the Kubernetes terminology, if there is in the Kubernetes, it's a little bit different because they're talking about nodes, not about cluster, right? So it's worker nodes and so on. So I'm not sure that there is terminology. It's not multi-cluster. So we can, I think it's a good idea to go to few multi-cluster kind of project. I don't know, like cross-plane, multi-cluster SIG and so on. And by the way, going to the multi-cluster SIG and see what is the definition, it's also a good idea. And the last comment is we may want to look on some strong existing kind of products and so on and just see what they refer to the actual target clusters, right? We do not need to take their view, but at least it will be good reference. That's it.
Hey, Paolo?
Yeah, I agree with Ezra. We should probably look at other projects and see if we can find some common terminology. Also, there is a balance here, between finding kind of precise terms like logical API server and trying to be more concise, because it seems very long. We may end up also having to say something like logical API server workload, so especially, when we replace with workspace, becomes something really long and a mouthful to pronounce. So I would like to find, if possible, something that is shorter. I understand the need to be precise, but I like, on the other hand, to find something shorter, if possible, we can use. And I don't think we have yet answered to this poll about the workload cluster. We're just talking now about other stuff, but in general, yes, this terminology we have to figure out.
Thank you, Paolo. I'm going to plus one on me. I'm going to vote. Mike, you're up, and then Franco.
Okay, So I totally agree with Alec, and we need to have upfront definitions outline. That's just basic 101 describing yourself. Totally agree. I'm a little surprised about his comment about terminology because both of the things that I mentioned, cluster and API server, are Kubernetes terminology. And I also agree with Ezra's point, they're not on point because Kubernetes is really a single cluster thing, and we're really trying to talk about going multi-cluster in some way. But I very much disagree with the idea of looking at other multi-cluster projects for inspiration, precisely because we're trying to talk about only server virtualization. Remember that what we're trying to talk about here, remember the KCP workspace is not a cluster. It is a subdivision of a API server. By the way, Andy, you could run API and server together. That is common Kubernetes typography. I agree with Paolo's concern about number of syllables. Cluster is shorter than API server. By the way I pronounce it, 3 syllables. Okay, but in terms if you write it out like that, it's LC versus LA. So in what we write, it could be equally short. But most importantly, I really want to disagree with looking to other multi-cluster management projects for inspiration, precisely because this concept is not about a whole cluster. That's the reason I don't like logical cluster in the first place, is we're only trying to talk about a slice of an API server or slice of a namespace, or the thing that's bigger than a namespace. And remember, right, these logical clusters, they don't equate to our edge clusters, right? When we rename, I'm talking about renaming our various workspaces. The edge cluster remains an edge cluster, or maybe I would say my suggestion would be workload execution cluster for those things. And then the thing we currently call workload management workspace, I would suggest calling the workload description logical cluster or logical API server. So workload description and workload execution, they pair nicely and describe the difference. The one that's a real cluster, I just definitely think we should keep calling it a cluster. The things that are not clusters, I would like to see them not called clusters.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Franco?
I think very briefly, I think the title, maybe I misunderstood, was talking about the P cluster. So in my mind, that's the actual targeted cluster, as Ezra mentioned, and I would just call it target cluster. That would be my suggestion. I also understand Mike's point of the workspace renaming. If that comes up to be logical cluster, then the target cluster in comparison could be also called physical cluster, right? To distinguish them and go along with the same terminology. That was only my comment.
Okay, thank you, Franco. Ezra?
So I think I relate to what Franco said. There is an issue here on the issue itself, right? The issue itself is talking only about the P cluster and what should we call our actual cluster where we deploy workloads, right? Workload, target, whatever. Mike mentioned correctly that in our architecture, we are also using what we call clusters or workspace and so on as our isolation unit. So we cannot disconnect those two terminology issues, right? If we choose, it's a unique problem to our architecture, right? Because if there is another multi-cluster solution that doesn't use any local kind of cluster, they won't have any issue to just call it clusters, right? So those two terminology things need to go hand by hand. This I agree with Mike. If we change it to workload clusters, we need to not use the word cluster or workload or anything on our local thing. So I don't have a good, I don't have, maybe we should start with the internal one other than the physical, right? Can we come up with a name that doesn't have cluster in it to represent our local isolation unit? And workspace is something we don't want to use, so any other option will be good. And then we can continue with the target one. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Ezra. Kevin?
Ezra actually said in passing, what I was going to suggest is if we're building a glossary, just use the term workload target, and in the definition, list all the things it can be, including different kinds of clusters. Because if one of the points is it doesn't necessarily have to be a cluster, don't use cluster at all in the name. Simply use workload target and expand that in the glossary to be all the different things it could be.
That's actually, sorry to barge in, that's excellent point, because we are now limiting ourselves to target Kubernetes clusters, our Thinker, Random, and so on. But the KubeStellar architecture doesn't prohibit you to target something which is not cluster, right? Just put the appropriate Thinker or whatever. It doesn't need to be a cluster there. So that's an excellent point, Kevin. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Ezra. Mike?
Okay, we could, I agree kind of with Ezra's observation. The title of this issue is much narrower than I took it to mean. Maybe we're making it a bigger problem than it needs to be. We could resolve this issue by just saying, instead of P cluster, we're going to call it the workload execution cluster. We could stop there. Andy, I think maybe I've confused you. If I read the first line in your comments, you're mixing up different issues there. So let me try to separate them. One issue is, what do we say? One issue is, what do we say instead of P cluster? We had agreed, I thought, that it was called edge cluster. And somebody didn't edit every document, or somebody misunderstood the agreement we had months ago. We should have been saying edge cluster instead of P cluster all along. Okay, we could close this thing. We could close this, stop there. Okay, that leaves us with two more issues. One is, as we generalize from edge, now what do we say instead of edge? Okay, and we could narrowly define that in this issue. And then there's a third issue, which is, what do we say instead of workspace? Okay, that's the one that I was focusing on. That's the one that's the most difficult. We could roll all these three together into one and just agree on a new, vocabulary. We have, just a handful. We have 5 kinds of things here. Okay, so I think that for what do we say instead of workspace? Again, I think the leading candidates are logical cluster or logical API server. What do we say instead of P cluster, or for that particular thing? I think calling it workload execution. I like that because it connects and contrasts with the workload management, which I suggest we rename to workload description, logical cluster or logical API server, or whatever you want to say instead of workspace. So I think I agree that in some sense the rest of KubeStellar doesn't care whether the workload execution cluster is a real cluster or not. It doesn't rely on anything more than it actually being a logical API server. It could be a logical API server, but I think if we call it that, we're going to confuse people. I think calling it a cluster conveys the idea that this design is about getting stuff there and it runs there. So we can certainly note that the rest of the system, that this Edge MC thing does not depend on things actually running there. It only depends on, again, on the API service there. But I think to explain what we're doing, I think we should call it a cluster, describe it as, describe the system in terms of stuff running there. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Ezra, I'll give you last word. We got to move on.
I actually, from a very bad experience trying to show diagrams and explain about KubeStellar, I must say that the word workspace helped us a lot. The fact that what we are using internally doesn't have the word cluster. As soon as we introduce the word cluster, immediately people starting to think that those are the actual cluster. You remember even when we present the logical cluster framework, they think we are managing the actual edge cluster. I really support if anyone, and we were creative with KubeStellar, so we shouldn't stop with that. If we can come up with something that doesn't have the word cluster to represent what we use today as workspaces or logical cluster, that will be excellent. I don't have an idea, but you guys are welcome to, and then everything is solved. You can choose whatever you want for the external one. As soon as we have something inside that doesn't have the word logical cluster. And by the way, looking forward, when we want to move to namespaces and either isolation unit, that will fit in nicely. So whatever we find is fine with me.
Okay, thanks, folks. So what I'll do is we'll go back at this ticket next time we meet. Hopefully people have either done some external research and can add that to the ticket, or have made some more proposals within the ticket. Next time we'll put it to vote and see what we agree upon. If there's more that needs to be said and we need multiple issues, please go ahead and open them. If we can contain it within one, please go ahead and do that as well. If it can be done, if we need to do them piecemeal, then we'll do that as, whatever you suggest. So please take the initiative to either open issues, redefine, reclassify, and do the research on the back end, and we'll reconvene next time on June 29th to discuss the outcome. All right. Next up, let's see. Add a tutorial on using Kyverno with KubeStellar. Yana, can you give us any update on that?
No update.
Okay, no problem. All right. Add a tutorial on using Turbonomic with KubeStellar.
We need some help from the Turbo team, but I put the comment there in the issue, but haven't heard back from them yet.
Okay. Very good.
Yep.
All right. I've got one in here. Add a shell command that waits for a curl of the HTTP server to succeed within some time period. This is to try and eliminate one of the sleep commands that we've got inside the documentation. Potentially could be used for others as well, but for now, I just haven't had any time to readdress this. We had some code that was working, but it didn't. It was working locally, but wouldn't work within the CI. So it's specifically it's this set of code down here where we're waiting before this curl command executes. And right now it's a background task, so it's not shown in the foreground because the amount of time is negligible for someone who's waiting locally. So we'll see. Maybe I can get around to it at some point in the next week or two. Okay. Okay. Did Bob appear yet? No? Okay. All right, we did that. We did that. Okay, I think we already did we touch on this yet, Franco? So update MVI. So how are you doing on your MVI blog and the video?
I'm still waiting for Frank review, comments, and decision. So I'm not sure it's gonna happen by your desired Monday date. He said he was gonna send me comments, but I didn't receive them yet.
Okay, very good. If you could remind him, that'd be great. Let's see if we can make some progress there.
Okay.
Submission for KubeCon China. So I think we have 2 sessions proposed for KubeCon China, 2 CFPs. One is on KubeStellar proper, and the other one is on Kyverno. I'm sorry, C2P and Kyverno using KubeStellar under the covers. And if I think I remember correctly, Yana and Yuji, you were able to identify a person in Kyverno that can co-present with you. Can you give us an update?
Yes, today I had a quick call with Kubernetes contributors, and he agreed with co-presenters, and I am about to fill submissions, and hopefully tomorrow I will done.
Hey, that's great. Thanks for the update. All right, meeting, that doesn't need to be, that's happening now. Using MVI with KubeStellar. Any updates on this, Franco and Braulio? Should this be just combined, I guess? 514 and 216? Do you either want to do?
I mean, I interpret this that once the blog is out, we got authorization that we're gonna use some of the material.
Okay.
So, you know,
All right.
the video is gonna be included, right, when you post it, and the blog is part of the blog is gonna be referencing the actual full blog. That's my understanding.
All right, I'll leave them separate then, if that's okay with you. Okay, so that's it for, that concludes the in progress. On critical path. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mention, oh, moving. So just an update on move to KubeStellar. I opened up a practice repo, a test repo inside kcp-dev. I was able to move that repo to the new KubeStellar organization that's public. And I was able to change the repo name. I was able to keep settings for things like branch protection and doc settings, GitHub pages, etc. I was able to see actions running. I was able to transfer PRs, issues. The projects you had to bring over separately. You had to make a copy and then remove the old one. So the entire this last section, the entire repo can be transferred. I have asked the folks over at kcp-dev to support us to get over to move over with PROW from kcp-dev, and I've got some initial acceptance to that, and some PRs were added to kcp-dev to support that to the infra. I am also working on in the background having a K8 1.27 cluster provisioned, and I will make a run at trying to create our own PROW that can run inside IBM's IKS offering. And so I'm waiting for that. And if it's okay with you, Ezra, if you wouldn't mind caring for, if I need help with Sonar Cube reconfiguration, I'll ask you, but I should be able to take care of that. Yes, Ezra.
Oh, that was by mistake. I wanted to.
Oh, okay. Thumbs up. Okay.
It was thumb up. Yes, thank you.
Very good. Also, there's an item that was not in that checklist. Mike, I believe, was able to successfully build a PR in the new copy of the repo, the EdgeMC repo inside KubeStellar organization, to do things like substitution of strings for Edge-MC to KubeStellar so that the build runs properly. Mike, was everything successful there? Other than I took care of those other doc files in the source repo in EdgeMC, but is everything else successful in your
Yeah, like Paolo told us earlier, it's a very simple search and replace. I did it on the Go files and the go.mod. The go.sum, by the way, does not have that string that needs to be replaced. So just fixing up just doing a regular search and replace in go.mod and the Go files is all that I did.
Okay, thank you. All right, so what we'll do is if we're getting close here, if I can get PROW up and running next week, then maybe we could set a code freeze for next weekend, and then I could make the move over the weekend, and then we can be back up and running by the following Monday, just before the next meeting here. Does anybody have any concerns or questions about the move? Okay. All right, thank you. We'll move on.
Andy,
go ahead, Ezra.
Can you repeat? Maybe I mean that. When do you plan to do the move? Next week, you mentioned.
I'm thinking if I can get PROW up and running next week, then maybe we set a code freeze for next weekend.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So I'm thinking next Friday. So that would be 16 plus 7, 23rd. So let me put that in.
Fine. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Targeting code freeze and GH transfer plus reconfigs for June 23rd.
By the way, Andy, while you are searching, I think that PROW is, if you succeed to transfer everything and we can build it, the only thing that, PROW, without PROW, our life will be much more difficult. That's correct, but we can still, push a PR and manually review it and merge it and so on. So I don't think it's a showstopper, right? You can
Yeah.
still, so I think it's fine.
Yes, we have three potentials here. One is kcp-dev will continue to support us, but I'd prefer not to because I don't want to offload our costs onto them. I'd like to be kind about that. Two is to have our own, which I think I can do, and I'd like to challenge. And three is to do things by hand for some small short period of time. So we'll have to make that decisions at some point next week. I'll keep the Slack channel updated as to the progress.
Right. My point was that if looking now on our repository, we have very few PRs open, so it's a very good timing.
It's a good time. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I may have better news. I'm supposed to get the keys to the cluster this afternoon, and if that's the case, then I might be able to make progress over the weekend. I'm pretty eager to do this, so we'll see. Maybe we might even have it by Monday. I don't want to rush everybody, but it seems that everything else is in line and ready to go, other than PROW. Thank you, Ezra. Good observation, Franco.
A brief comment. Unfortunately, that weekend I'm traveling, so I will not have access to help out. Since I feel responsible for whatever the bootstrap and the binary release, maybe I can work with you in advance and we decide what needs to be done. I think it's just a matter of having the URL of the future binary release.
Okay, if you want, we have the repo over there in the new KubeStellar private, and you have access to it. So if you'd like to test the bootstrap, I would really appreciate that.
Okay, I'll try to look into it this week.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on. Okay, so we got critical path. So bottom up, logical clusters, use kubebind API export, stop using KCP sync. Okay, let's go through the stop using. I don't think we have any progress on either one of those.
No, I think that I was working offline with Robert I actually, and I think he's making progress. He needs some ramp up in Go and Kubernetes, so it takes time, but basically it should be very straightforward. So probably during next week, we will already have it, if not by the end of this week. Okay? Because it's basically just copy the resource files and regenerate all the code. That's it.
Very good. All right, that's good. Now, we don't have anybody assigned to location API resource. Ezra, can you comment on that? Is there any progress there?
I thought you can do both in one. It's just copying few files from one place to another. So I'm talking with him offline, and hopefully we'll be able to finish both.
Okay, I put him on there tentatively. If I need to pull him off, I can.
Yeah, I think it's artificially that I opened just 2 items. It can be only one, but
okay,
that's fine.
Very good. It's okay to have, yeah, it's up to you, but yeah. Oh, Franco, did you have another question?
Yeah, I apologize. It was on the previous issue. So when you transfer to KubeStellar, the HMC repo will go dark immediately, or you're planning to have it frozen for a little bit?
When I transfer KubeStellar, do I plan on having it
HMC
dark
to KubeStellar, right? The HMC,
It's a move.
It's a move. So everything is going to disappear immediately. Okay.
HMC disappears.
Thank
you. Okay. All right. Let's see. Use kubebind for API export and API bind. I see an update 3 days ago. Anything you want to add in here, June?
Let me see. Yeah. 3 days ago, what I did is to confirm that for the namespace resources, we can fully rely on KubeBind because I have a combination of the exported API plus the controller working on that API. So it's a proof before we can really rely on that. And right now what I'm doing is to try to document the usage of KubeBind as required by, as asked by Ezra, so that everyone else can easily get hands on. Basically, the README from KubeBind itself is good, in a good shape. It works. What I'm doing is trying to add some more details to that, so that it should be a little bit easier to follow. That's what I'm doing right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ezra?
I just want to put in context what is the next target, just that we know that eventually June did an excellent work in exploring this feature and so on. The next phase is we actually need to integrate it into KubeStellar, right? And that's something we need probably to design because this is a maybe quite a disruptive move. So we need to think how to do that. Can we do that in steps and so on? So probably yes, but that's the target, right? June tested it on some kind of external stuff, and now we need to integrate it into the KubeStellar flow. So,
Okay. Thank you, Ezra.
Yeah, thank you, Ezra.
Thank you, Drew. Okay, I've left notes in there for you. Okay. Next, develop a cluster aware Go client. Anything you want to comment on here, Ezra or Andre?
the work on the logical cluster is we actually finished the initial version of the client aware, a cluster aware client. We are at the end of finishing the initial provider, that's the other item. We pushed a PR on the API. So here is the deal. All our stuff, all the logical cluster stuff is it's not really merged, doesn't need to be merged into KubeStellar. It's completely new stuff, right? Different directories, files, and so on. And the only exception is the API resources, the new API resources we are using. Due to the code generation, those are going through merge on some files. So I pushed a PR only on that. Mike was kind enough to review it very quickly, had some comments, and hopefully we will be able to merge it before you are doing the KubeStellar move. So from now on, we do not anticipate any merging conflict whatsoever because everything that we push is completely new. So the anticipation is that next week we will already have something end-to-end working outside of KubeStellar. It's an end-to-end demo outside.
Excellent. Thank you for the update. That's great news. Okay, and then is there anything more we want to talk about with, this is the provider, this is the other part of it, right, that you said? So we've covered this, right?
Right, with one exception. It's a question probably to Paolo. Okay, because we do want to use also maybe try KubeFlex, and I want to try to avoid the trouble on bringing up KubeFlex, although it may be simple enough. So we can discuss whether maybe Paolo, you can bring something somewhere and we can use it or something like
Well,
that.
actually, yes, it's extremely simple.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew.
Anyway, yeah, we can chat offline.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry that I insinuated that it may be complex, but
No. By design, it's very, very simple. Believe me.
Okay, great. So let's talk offline and see how to bring it up.
Okay, yeah. Two things. For this framework, I want to emphasize that I don't think all the providers should have to be, in this repo. right? We should support providers that live in other repos. That what I currently see in the thing I reviewed, and I didn't get a chance to write this in the review, but what I see is an enumeration of provider types, in that repo, which suggests that the only allowed providers are in that repo. And we need to have it possible for independent parties to create providers.
Oh, we do support it. At this point, you do need, as I said, we can take, once again, we can take it to the next community call discussion where we can go through the architecture. At this point, the provider definition, it's not part of the repo, but you need to create a provider definition in the management. In the future, we plan to avoid it. Currently, you are correct, Mike. It shouldn't be in the repository, but you are correct that the cluster manager, our library is knowledgeable about the providers. You cannot just bring a provider that we don't know about. And we plan to change it.
All right. And Andy, something's not showing up here in this Kanban board, which is issue 522, which I think is urgent because we have VLA colleagues who are having trouble with that.
Okay, let's go grab that. Get that 522. In progress, Mike?
Yeah, I am working on that. I do have a PR that I opened. I haven't tested it yet. In fact, I just realized it's incomplete, but I am working on it.
All right, I put it in critical path, Mike. Okay, very good. Anybody else with anything that they saw that was missing from Sprint 1? You can also feel free to look ahead at how Sprint 2 is looking. I haven't put 3 in here yet, but and then of course anything that's not associated with a sprint is there. Okay, so let's move on to the agenda. Next up, I just wanted to give you a quick status update on what's going on with our application for Sandbox. CNCF Sandbox folks have said, hey, thank you for your application. We have a few things we'd like you to focus on in the coming months ahead, and please reapply. The next time they vote, I believe, is in September. So the good news is that whereas for a project that's only 7 months old and just got their first quick start out a month ago, I think we're in pretty good shape. Where we could use some help, where you all can help as part of the community, is one, we make this transition to the new KubeStellar organization. I think that's underway. Thank you, Andrea. 2, we make an effort to seek out and look for places where we can publicize our project. And 3, we look for other communities where we can visit their community, get on their agenda, and talk about our project. And I say this as we, a big underscore on we. So if you're part of the community, we can use this as a flywheel to make more progress. I can only do so much as one person, but I plan on doing more in this space. But I'd love some help here. So please, if you have communities you think we should be introducing ourselves to, send them my way, or make a plan to present it yourself. Many of you on this call are owners of the repository, and this is one of your functions as an owner. So please do your best in trying to fulfill that. So we will try to reapply in a few months' time. And I am trying to get more clarity inside the ticket and talking to people that are in the CNCF tag runtime. Any questions or comments on the application? Okay, great. Paolo, could you? I put something on here, but I obligated you. Could you give us an introduction to KubeFlex?
Sure. Maybe it will be best if I share, because this is one of the repos that currently we have in the KubeStellar organization. So the idea is really to have this provider. Let me share my screen for a sec.
I'm putting the repo name in the repo location in the chat.
Yeah. So I'll give a quick intro of what is KubeFlex. So the idea was really to, as we have been looking for alternative to logical clusters, right? We still want to support somehow KCP workspace logical cluster, but we are looking for other alternatives and try to do this in a kind of scalable and efficient way. So one alternative, of course, is the kind logical cluster approach that is being currently built. And of course, in the future, we're going to look also other alternatives. And KubeFlex provide essentially an alternative that tries to be somehow in between the workspace or logical clusters provided by KCP and running full clusters. So the idea is really to run the minimum that we need for each kind of logical application server or whatever you want to call when with the terminology, and really run in a hosted cluster that could be, in this particular case, we are starting with kind, but could be any Kubernetes cluster. Could be, of course, hosted a managed cluster like IKS, EKS, etc. Could be OpenShift, etc. And the idea is really to provide these very lightweight API server instances and some selected controllers as a service. The idea is also to provide options for the way we support the storage backend. So it could be the typical etcd running together with the API server, the controllers in a namespace in the hosting cluster, or could be a shared database. And for that, we have different options. We are supporting kind plus Postgres for now for the shared database, but you could also use etcd as a shared database. The idea is to be able for the API server to use upstream Kubernetes distributions. For example, right now we're using the 127 image, but of course you can pick the image that you like to use, and possibly even to explore more trimmed builds. So there are other projects that are exploring the idea to use upstream API server libraries to build smaller, somehow footprint API servers running pretty much everything one binary, similar to what somehow KCP has been doing, but without, of course, the logical cluster within that particular context. And the idea is also to provide this single binary CLI for somehow giving a simpler user experience. So the idea of, for example, initializing a hosting cluster if you're using kind, otherwise if it's an existing cluster, you can just point to that, installing the operator, manage the lifecycle, the control plane, etc. I'll just show a picture to show how this looks like. So there is essentially this hosting cluster that you see the big box on the right side of the picture. We have the CLI that is providing the experience of bringing up essentially the management for these hosted control planes. And there is an operator, as you can see, in a system namespace, plus the shared database that is essentially providing the backend for the control planes that the API servers that want to use the shared database. Or we could have the option where you want to have a control plane with a dedicated database, like the one shown in the bottom. And the experience for anybody who wants to try is very simple. Pretty much, by the way, this instruction are changing probably today, because now we have actually a fast release here. You can just try the release, but for now, the idea is you just build the CLI, and if you have kind installed, you just run this command, init create kind, and then you can just create a control plane, and your current context will be set to point to that API service, and then you can start doing things like creating namespace or somehow interacting with that control plane that you just created. And you can create another one, and if you want to go back to the context in the original cluster, you just run a KFlex context command. And then you can also delete, of course, control planes. And again, this is all managed by the operator. There is a control plane CR, and you could do everything in theory just using kubectl commands, but the CLI some makes the experience a little easier. And that was really somehow is being overlaid really on top of existing Kubernetes APIs like the control plane CR, etc. Okay, so that was a brief intro. Maybe next time we can even show a demo when we have more time, but I invite people to try it out, give feedback, open issues if there is anything that they find here. Thank you.
Paolo, thank you. Would you mind giving us a full demo next time?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Great. All right. Any questions for Paolo? Okay, I just had one thing to add to there was something that was in Sprint 2 that it's for Kube. We're preparing for KubeCon North America, and in the rush to get things done, I was able to take the abstract that Yana and Yuji put together for KubeCon Shanghai for C2P, Kyverno, and KubeStellar, and I was able to ask and advertise that information on our Slack channel. And somebody from Kyverno community was kind enough to stand up and say they would like to co-present that information. So the good news is that we will have a counterpart, not only in Shanghai, but in North America to show off the work that we've done for C2P with Kyverno and KubeStellar, specifically highlighting the upsync work, the upsync feature that we have. So that's really good news. So Kyverno is excited to work with us. I thought I'd just bring that into this meeting to advertise it a bit. Okay, folks, any other comments or questions, general? All right, thank you all for attending. I'll be posting the recording soon. I'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.